Hi everyone, it's Christina, and I will be talking with you about my study about investigating the relationship between teacher self-efficacy and submitted office discipline referrals. So a little bit of introduction about my study. Two main parts that you will need to understand is self-efficacy, and when we look at the field of education and teachers, when we look at self-efficacy or that belief about what you can do, we look at three separate areas. One is student engagement, another is instruction, and the third area is classroom management. Another important piece of information to understand is student disruptive behaviors. So those might include, common misbehaviors or disruptive behaviors like talking out of turn or blurting an answer out in class. And they might range all the way up to disrespect, defiance, flipping over a desk or a chair. And one way that schools document those behaviors is through the use of a form called an office discipline referral. So teachers complete these forms, noting the behavior and where the situation occurred so that they can track that information. So based on some of the research that I've done and the research that I've read, there's definitely a gap in how a teacher's belief about their ability in the areas of engagement, instruction, and classroom management relate to their abilities to manage behavior or track those behaviors through office discipline referrals. So my guess is, or what I'll be investigating is I think that teachers with low self-efficacy struggle to manage students' disruptive behaviors in the classroom, and that those teachers with that low self-efficacy submit more office discipline referrals than teachers with higher self-efficacy. So essentially my question is, what is the relationship between teacher self-efficacy and the number of submitted office discipline referrals? But I also am going to control for biological sex, years of experience, and level of education of the teacher. So the time and the purpose of the study, this is a cross-sectional study, meaning that we're looking at one particular moment in time. Teachers will, I'll look at the office discipline referrals for one school year, and then teachers will complete the teacher self-efficacy scale, which is a 24-question survey, and they'll complete that survey for that one period of time at the end of that school year. This is a non-experimental research design, so it's predictive in nature. And because it's predictive in nature, that means that it has a very clear framework that goes with it. And so I'm using Bandura's social cognitive theory of self-regulation as the basis or the theoretical framework for this study. So the significance is that one of the things that we know is that disruptive student behavior impacts the learning environment of all students. So it's not just even those students in the classroom, it can be for the entire school. And so my hope is that with this investigation and with the information that I gather, that it's going to lead to better training for teachers and administrators. If teacher self-efficacy is one of those things that really and truly impacts student management, how can we better train teachers and how can administrators better support them? And then I'm also looking at, hopefully, that once that is done, that there's a positive impact on the learning environment for all students. So a lot about the methodology. So I stated earlier that this is a non-experimental research design. I'll be looking at survey and secondary data analysis. So initially, when I proposed this study, I was looking at just the teachers in one of the intermediate school districts within the UP. And when I started to look at the number needed for each of the variables, I realized that that population was going to be too small. And so I decided to expand it out to include all elementary teachers in the UP, but I do plan to exclude the teachers in the Delta Schoolcraft ISD because of my close relationship within that ISD, and that would include teachers that work directly with me. So there's a little bit of an ethical, there's a little bit of a problem there with including those teachers. So those teachers will be excluded. And then I plan to use a census sampling. So I will use all of the elementary teachers in the UP, again, with the exclusion of those teachers from the Delta Schoolcraft ISD. So my data collection is going to occur in two separate phases. So in phase one, I'm actually going to be looking at the secondary data first. So I'll be looking at those ODRs. And again, because I'm only looking for the number that they're submitted, not the type of behavior that they're referring, but just the number that they submit. I'll be collecting that information from schools. My hope is that they collect that information electronically or have some kind of a reporting mechanism for that. And so I just need to collect that number and then have the teacher name with that number associated. And then phase two of data collection will be, I'll take all of that information and I'll develop a link through Qualtrics with a specific link to the teacher self-efficacy scale. And again, that's a 24-question survey, which has been tested repeatedly, so it's both reliable and valid. But I do plan to pilot the survey, not because I need to pilot the instrument itself, but I do need to pilot that data collection. So does that Qualtrics link work? And for that, I can use teachers within my own building because that information isn't really going anywhere. So I can use or plan to use 3 or 4 teachers just to pilot that data collection. A little bit more about the methodology of this study. So the independent variables that I'll be looking at for the study are the 3 different and distinct areas of teacher self-efficacy. So the efficacy of management, engagement, and instruction, and all of those are continuous variables. I do need to mention that the teacher self-efficacy scale is a 9-point Likert scale, so that's why these variables are continuous. There's no category that they fall into. It would just be somewhere along that scale. The dependent variable would be office discipline referrals, and again, that's continuous. And then the control variables that I plan to, I'll collect that information. That demographic data will be collected at the end of the survey. And so I'll be controlling for the categorical variables of biological sex and level of education, and then the continuous variable of years of experience of the teacher. So when we look at that handy dandy flow chart that we got, I needed to determine how I'm going to analyze this data. And so because I'm starting with more than one independent variable, I look at my dependent variable then, which is continuous, which leads me to determining that I need to perform a multiple regression for this particular study. So some of the limitations of this study would be time. If we're looking at, or if I'm looking at conducting this at the end of the year, time is always crunched for teachers at the end of the year because they're doing end of the year assessments. They're really struggling to meet all of the expectations of the end of the year with record keeping. And so getting them to do one more thing could be a potential limitation. Access is also going to be a concern for this study. So how am I going to have access to both the teachers and to the office discipline referral information? Again, I had stated earlier that my hope is that the office discipline referrals are kept electronically, or there's some kind of electronic report that can be run. So I suspect that there might be something there. And then also cost. The cost isn't associated with participants of the study, but it will be for me because I will be planning to offer incentives for the teachers that complete this. So not an incentive for everyone, but those teachers that complete will be entered into a drawing, and probably 4 $50 gift cards of some sort. Given our limited access to different things in the UP, Amazon might be a great thing to try. And then a potential limitation of this study might be the fact that at this point, I will not be collecting information about class level. So I won't be looking at, is it a self-contained classroom, or is it a classroom with students in special education? So that level of classification within the classrooms is something that that could be a potential limitation. So in summary, this will be a non-experimental study. I'm looking at two data sources. The first is a secondary data source, the Office Discipline Referrals, and the second is a survey that will go out to teachers, so that will be a primary data source. I did fail to mention, but find it important, that as far as the timing for the study, again, I had mentioned that it's cross-sectional, but I wanted to make sure that you are aware that the plan is that when that initial survey goes out, that there will be very clear expectations set about when the surveys need to be returned. And if they aren't returned within 2 weeks, a reminder email will go out, another 2 weeks, another reminder, and then hopefully at that point I'll be close to 100% completion, and if not, a third and final reminder will go out to teachers that are participating. Again, I had mentioned that the population for this study will be all of the elementary teachers within the Upper Peninsula, with the exclusion of teachers in the Delta Schoolcraft ISD. My variables, the independent variables will be the different areas of teacher self-efficacy. So the efficacy related to engagement, instruction, and classroom management. And then the dependent variable will be Office Discipline Referrals, and then the control variables that I had mentioned previously. Because of the way that the variables are set up, I plan to use a multiple regression for the data analysis, and the overall hope for this study is that based on the information collected and that analysis, that it will turn out to have a positive impact on teacher training, classroom management, and learning environments. Thank you so much for watching, and look forward to any feedback that I get. Thank you.